Thank you so much. It's a great honor for me to be with you today. I'm very appreciative of the chance to say a few words to you. You are meeting at a very auspicious and challenging time for the world and therefore for the United Nations. You know, I've often said that many times people blame the United Nations for many of the ills facing the world. But I can't help but think that it's a little bit like blaming the Montreal Forum every time the Habs lose a game. It's not the fault of the Forum. It's not the fault of the United Nations. It's the fault of the nations. And when we look at it, our fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves. And we have to think about that, I think, as we face the world, which is challenged. I mean, it is a challenging time. It's been made even more challenging by the arrival of a global pandemic, which many experts told us would come. Many people didn't believe them. And in fact, we know many people still don't believe them, even now that it's clearly with us and is having a serious impact on us. But of course, what this means is that the resources of the UN and all of its organizations and all of its agencies, the challenge facing every one of the agencies has grown tremendously. And as you will know as well, the UN doesn't go out and borrow money. The UN only gets money from nation states and from private contributions of one kind or another. And nation states are very much preoccupied with what's happening in their own country, what's happening in their own situation. And we know in Canada this is true, in the United States it's true, in every country in the world it's true. And what this really means is that just at the time when the world needs the presence of the United Nations, the leadership of nations working together, and needs a stronger common response to a common challenge, a common global response to a global challenge, just at that very moment when that is what is required, we're facing a series of challenges to making that happen. We have more authoritarian governments than we've had in a long time. We have greater amounts of xenophobia and nationalism, both ethnic nationalism and economic nationalism. We have attacks on protectionism. We have attacks on the rule of law. We have attacks on human security. And we have great disruption, the disruption of new technologies, so that we're in the middle of a technological revolution at the same time. Putting all these things together, it's a very challenging moment for the United Nations, and it's a very challenging moment for the world. I think we need to reflect on those challenges and also reflect on the fact that we are responding. It's not a hopeless situation. It's one where we can see in some circumstances we're making progress. We're advancing things in ways that we might not have even thought possible before. And the efforts that we're making are being recognized. For example, the World Food Program being awarded the Nobel Prize is an indication that somebody out there is watching and listening and observing just how dramatically the common institutions of the world, like the World Food Program, are responding to this crisis in a way that reflects both generosity, but also efficiency and a willingness to really engage and deal with the challenges that we face. Nous savons très bien que ce n'est pas facile. Nous savons très bien que on travaille fort, mais souvent avec beaucoup de difficultés, avec beaucoup de résistance, à la fois résistance, disons, financière de la part des pays qui ont les moyens, mais qui n'ont pas la volonté de donner et d'offrir leurs services pour les Nations Unies, et en même temps, difficulté à cause des problèmes. Les problèmes deviennent plus sévères, plus complexes, et on a toujours le sens que c'est la faute de quelqu'un d'autre. C'est pas la nôtre, mais c'est la faute de quelqu'un d'autre. And that, I think, is the challenge that we face. We are very quick to blame. We're very quick to point fingers at others. We're very quick to decline to take responsibility ourselves and push it back onto others. And I think that as Canadians, we all have an obligation to really reflect on what it is this institution can do, and what it is that we must do with the UN in order to help make it happen. And here I think we have to go back to basic principles. We came out of the Second World War with a commitment to end the scourge of war, because the damage of war had been so significant. But almost right away, almost right after that moment in 1945, the conflict continued in a variety of ways. The Cold War, the war in Korea, which was a very hot war. We lost a lot of lives in Korea. We saw a significant loss of life and tremendous problem as a result of the conflict. And then the challenge of decolonization, then the emergence of further wars in Vietnam and elsewhere, and continuing into the modern era, where despite the brief moment when the Berlin Wall came down and people thought that somehow political conflict was over, we then realized that no, it's taking different forms in different places. And many, many times the problem has been not that we had too much United Nations, the problem was that we didn't have enough. We didn't have enough common will to deal with problems together. We didn't have enough common will to intervene and make a difference. So as Canadians, we have to really renew our commitments to the United Nations, not just verbally, not just in terms of what we say, but also in terms of what we do. So when it comes to the challenge of COVID, we have to step up. And I'm pleased to say the Prime Minister has stepped up. Our Prime Minister has announced additional funding. Our Prime Minister has announced additional measures that we will take to support the United Nations in its work. And we have the challenge ahead of saying, what more can we do on climate change? How can Canada become more of a leader on that most significant of issues? And finally, we have to recognize that when it comes to peace, peace is as elusive today, almost as elusive today as it was in 1945. We see many sources of conflict that are being exacerbated by climate change, exacerbated by the ethnic conflicts that are still deeply embedded in human societies around the world. And we have a need to continue to address those, the sources of the conflict, the outcome of the conflict. And at the same time, remember, who are we doing it for? Here we are at the 75th anniversary. We're doing it for the next generation. We're doing it for the future. We're doing it for young people. We're doing it for children. We're doing it for a growing group of people who have no idea what the Second World War was about, no idea what the early challenges facing the United Nations was all about, but they do know what's facing them, and they do know the situation they're up against, and they're looking for a better world and a better place for them to grow up and for them to be able to bring their own children into the world. So that's really what we're trying to do. That's what Canada's role is. That's what our challenge is. And I want to thank all of you for having helped the United Nations to get to this 75 years, but know that there's still much more to do, and there's still much more that we all have to contribute in the time ahead. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm very, very proud to be here with the two flags behind me, the United Nations and the flag of Canada. When I sit here, those flags are always touching. And they're always very close together, and that's the way it should be. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.